Okay, hey everybody. So I moved outside, as you can see, because I feel like I'm falling off. I'm on a steep incline here, but it's pretty background with the flowers, and I just felt it was important to record this part outside, which is where I would choose to live all the time if I could. And this section of the video, or it's really its own message, I suppose, is all about the life that stirs within you. So we're going to start with Jesus. And this will be a bit more this will appeal to you more if you have a Christian background. But I really encourage you to watch if you feel at all drawn to this, because there's something here for you. If you have been drawn to tune in. Okay, let me make sure that I'm actually on the video as it's recording, because I really don't know. I've got so many windows open here. I don't even know where I am here. Hello. Begin. So we're going to start with the person of Yeshua ben Joseph, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus Christ. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. These are the words that are recorded in the opening chapter to John, which I love so much and quote often. In him was life. Jesus himself, in answer to the question of why he had come, said quite clearly and succinctly, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. He has come that you might have life and have it to the full. And we have been sent in his name. We have come to experience life, to have life, to receive life, and to receive it in all of its abundance, and then to share that with others. And this is the cycle of life. This is the circle of being and becoming that knows no end. It is the world without end, if you will. So this is why Jesus said he has come. He came that we might have life and have it to the full. And this is a way in which we might choose to life as well. So he did not say, I came to save you. He did not say, I came to fix you. He did not say, I came to set up an earthly kingdom and to rule here and now in glory forever and ever. Amen. He did not say, I came to give you a little piece of heaven. Here's your treasured gift. And enjoy it. In fact, he said more than that. He said, the kingdom of heaven is within you here and now. That's what he said. But let's go back to, he said, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. He said, I have come to set the captives free. He said, I have come to proclaim the good news. He said, I have come to that the blind might see, and I have come to set the prisoner free. I came that you might have life and have it to the full. It was his life that sets us free, that sets us aright and right back onto the path of love, the path of freedom, the path where we are able to receive grace and to partake of that unshakable kingdom, to know that heaven on earth is not only possible, but that we are here to usher it in. This is the grace that has been poured out on us. He said, I came that you might have life and have it to the full. So I have a question for you. Do you feel that stirring within you? Do you feel how now, with every fiber of your being, that you know you have been set free, that there is good news, and that good news is of the Lord's great favor to you as you are right now? No need for anything to be fixed or polished up or changed or saved or washed clean. It's already finished. It's already done. Do you feel the life rising up now in our time, stirring among us, moving within you? Do you know what you know? Do you see? Do you see that you too have come to taste this life, to touch it, to hear its song, to see its splendor, to feel it move through you unhindered? Do you know what you know? What is this life? In the early days, After the resurrection, the one life, his one life that was the light of mankind, it flowed out freely to all. It was evident in everyday occurrences. They saw with their own eyes, both those who had followed Yeshua during his life and those who had been on the periphery and watched it all go down, and those who had took part in the dismantling of what he was bringing forward. Everyone could feel, see, taste, touch, experience the life set free. The life that came and flowed out in every direction across all the globe, unhindered, and flowed freely for a time shortly after the resurrection. So, what is this life? What is this life? And how was it that it was unimpeded by any attempt at human intervention or to stem the tide of this life? It was set free in a time then that was extraordinary. And here we are in a time now that is extraordinary. So after the resurrection, I believe 10 days after was the ascension of Jesus. And then there were 10 days of where it's like the world stood still. 10 days of like everything hanging in the balance. No one sure of what was going to happen next. This man had been raised to new life from he was dead and he lived again, and then he ascended to the Father in heaven, just as he said he would. Everything was turned on its head. No one knew what was going to happen next. And then 10 days after the ascension of Jesus, a great wind stirred. They were gathered in a marketplace in an ordinary setting outside the temple, and a great wind stirred, and people from every nation were there. And everything again was turned on its head. It was the wind of Spirit on the day of Pentecost, and that wind unleashed the life of God and set the love that lived in the one named Jesus free. Again, flowed in every direction. It came, it flowed, it poured through them. It moved among them. It prompted them to go. It literally changed lives in a heartbeat. It filled them with a great knowing and understanding. Sorry. It caused them to rethink everything that they thought they had known. It helped many of them to see life with their real eyes, to realize what was right in front of them, and that all he said was true. So what was it like? It was like a river. It moved swiftly, and it poured out upon the world that was thirsty for such a truth. It was like a mountain, and it stood firm against all the powers of man. It was like a fire that consumed anything that thought it could extinguish that light of man and woman. That was the life that had been set free and could not be stopped. It was a fire. It was a river. It was a mountain. And like a wind, it moved and turned everything on its head. It was all things, it was no thing. It was everything they had been waiting for. It was nothing the world had ever seen. Acts chapter 2 describes the scene and all that happened and unfolded from that day of Pentecost, from the movement of the Spirit upon the earth. And remember, this was a time much like ours when there were, most definitely, there was an order to things, a certain way things should be done. And come here. And come here. That's the dog. I don't know if you can see her in the video shot or not. Hello, say hello. There was an order to things in that time, just as there is in our time. And Acts chapter 2 says this is what happened. It says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. all the believers were together and they had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily. They came together as one. There was no division. The illusion of separation had been shattered, and it was just unprecedented. All were seeing one another through new eyes. Those from extremely different backgrounds, those who had previously been separated by the barrier of language or religion or culture or belief or tradition, all of that was laid to rest. There was no more separation, for they were one, and it was one life, and it was that life that was flowing among them and between them and through them. And the life that moved among them and through them, and they began to realize that this life was flowing through them. It was rising up from within them. And it was just as Jesus said it would be to his closest followers. They recognized that this is what he had been telling them about. This is what that they hadn't really grasped when he was right there, sitting there with them, telling them in those last days about the comforter he would send, but more than that, about the life that they would be called into and to carry to all the world and to embody and to walk in that way of life and to be one with the life and to break the bread and to come together and to have fellowship and with great open hearts to share all they had in common. Um, this was exactly what he had been talking about all along, and they hadn't received it. They hadn't understood it. They had not grasped it. They had not yet realized. They had not yet seen the beyond what was evident. And so here they were, and everything changed. Everything changed for those first followers. You know, Peter and John, immediately after the Pentecost story, is the story of, you know, within days or maybe the next day, I'm not quite sure, I think it's in Acts chapter 3, and Peter and John are there and they heal a lame man. And Peter says, you know, silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. There was a spirit of generosity running through them, every single one of them, those who had so many differences between them and among them for that short time, there was none of that existed anymore. They were literally walking in a new world. And so, you know, there were healings that took place that, just as Jesus had said, were, you know, you shall do greater things than these. And you know, suddenly, you know, the lame were walking and jumping and praising God. And then their spiritual gifts were just blown wide open. They could see the hearts of men, the stories say, and they could understand when someone was lying about the source of where some money or offering came from, and they could know things. But how did they know them? It was a mystery. But they trusted the flow of life through them, and they knew that that life was the same life that was in Jesus, that was Jesus, and that was now being poured out to all the world. It was his life that was being poured out, not merely some sacrifice. He wasn't only a sacrificial lamb. He was God's love for us made manifest, and it wasn't taken away at all. You know, oh death, where is thy sting? You know, it was the death could not contain the life. So I'll also say that before this all became compromised, they spoke with boldness and authority and conviction. But most importantly, they spoke from the purity of the love and the life that flowed through them. They had no qualms about speaking directly to the religious powers of the day, to the Sanhedrin Council, and to other authorities, government, religious, and otherwise. They were clear who they answered to, and it was not the rules of human convention. It was not the leaders of the various societal segments. No, they were operating um, in and one with the love of God, the life that was in Jesus the Christ, and that was now theirs to enjoy. And it was a gift that they received graciously and that they honored with the way they walked through their life, the way they embodied that life. They cast out spirits, evil spirits. They met others who were very different from them with a spirit of love and honor and integrity. They did not judge or condemn, but rather they met people where they were and they set them free in love, for love. They were on fire. They were on fire from the fire that burned within their hearts, and they witnessed firsthand the presence of God. They saw it in Stephen's face as he spoke. His face shone like an angel. They they witnessed so much, and others witnessed it as well. And the other people who didn't like what they saw, they were fueled by this sort of twofold flame that was. It was both a resistance to the light of God, the light of man that was the life. That life, they were resistant to the life, the flow of life, because they were afraid that they would lose their standing or lose power or lose control, and things would just get out of hand. And they thought themselves to be above that, above life, above God. And they also had a thirst. This was the other thing. The other part of that twofold flame was that they had a thirst for power and control and dominion and money, and they moved quite quickly, to extinguish the flow of life. And that life that was a light unto the world, they wanted to absolutely extinguish that light. But the flame that they brought forward, these two, this resistance to life and also this desire to control and to have it go the way they wanted to go, it was nothing. It could not stop the flow of this life. And make no mistake, this life was the very life of Jesus, one with the life of God the Father and the movement of the Spirit. And the gifts of wisdom and grace. That's what was flowing freely. And that's what was running through the community of believers in those early days. This is the life that is offered to you and to me here and now. This is the life which we were born to live, to partake of, to experience fully. So let's explore this a little bit more. Let's talk about that life. And life, for those of you who don't know, is an acronym that I use for living in full expression. That's what the life and the life more abundant are about. They are about us stepping into the whole of who we are and allowing that life to come forth from us and to be shared with all the world. This is the life that's offered to you and me. So let's look at a couple of things. So let's first look at the life of Jesus, the Christ, and how that life flowed through the closest of his followers of the way in the days after the resurrection. Let's look specifically at a couple of ways this happened. So again, the life could not be contained by death. And that life is what met Peter. Let's start with Peter, why not? That life is what met Peter and the Jewish believers whose hearts were opened and their worldview was shattered when they saw that life that began to flow to those who they had once thought as other than or different than and other, that they were a different class of people altogether. They are referred to in the scriptures as the Gentiles, so the non-Jewish population. And when they saw that this life wasn't just contained to their little circles of the Jewish population, Jesus was a Jew, and of course he came, for the Jewish people. This was their reasoning. They didn't yet understand until after the Ascension and the Pentecost. They had not grasped this fact that the life was one life, that is one life to be shared, that broke through every barrier. every barrier, that there was no other, there was no separation anymore. And so that life that could not be contained by death was there with Peter and the others who were leading in the days following the death of Jesus. And they saw that life flowing in every direction, flowing, and it was a miracle to behold. And the world began to see this radical love that was the outgrowth of their of all who were partaking of the life, simply allowing the flow of the life and seeing that all are welcome at the table. All are welcome. And this was the new covenant in action. It was absolutely happening. And this life, this light that could not be contained by death, is what met each of the earliest followers when they found themselves, some of them locked in prisons or in the presence of one um, who was working against them, who was in service to all the distortions of that one life. It was the life itself that sustained them. This life that could not be contained by death, it's what moved through the hearts of women, of wealthy women who were able to somehow open their treasure chests and give freely to support the good of all, to share the good news. And it also flowed through the hearts of, those who were living in poverty, who shared their very last, meal, their last loaf of bread, with a stranger passing by. Out of what? Out of love, out of the absolute flow, unimpeded flow of this inexplicable thing that was the life of Christ poured out. This life that could not be contained by death is what moved among them in these small communities where they gathered to break bread and to share all they had in common. This life that could not be contained by death is what sustained them on the treacherous journeys that they went on, and it's what went out before them and infused them with such a joy that they never could have imagined. Not one of them, not even one of his closest followers, not even Mary Magdalene, not even Peter, not even John the Beloved, not any of them. It was absolutely astounding. This life that could not be contained by death, by anything that was less than the full glory of God made manifest here and now, this life was literally changing lives, changing communities, changing the world before their eyes in those first days. So the life that rose up among the early disciples and flowed out in every direction unexpectedly to them, that life changed the world. And that life is powerful. It remains available to us today, here, now, in this day. It will move unhindered by human limitation. It will shake the foundations of all we know to be that life. It will not be contained by death, no matter what death arises. Life. So let's talk also about that the life of Jesus the Christ that flowed through the one who had once devoted his everyday, his life's work to defeating or blocking this way of Jesus. He detested all things about the way, the name, the idea, the audacity. He wanted nothing of it. That life, that life that could not be contained by death, is what met Saul on the road to Damascus. It's the power that shook him like a lightning bolt and completely reordered and reoriented his life and his work. That life that could not be contained by death is what flowed through Paul, then Saul became Paul. And when he looked into the eyes of someone in the crowd And he could see, suddenly Paul could see through to that man's soul, and he saw the desire for life and for healing inside this one who was listening so intently to his words. And he spoke from the unimpeded flow of love in his life. From that life he spoke, and he said, stand up and walk just as Jesus had done. This same life moved through Paul and the earlier followers, and really all who aligned their lives with not only the way of Jesus, the person, but with the way of life, which is what the way of Jesus is all about. Life. I know I'm repeating that a lot. Life, life, life. And it is a bit of a sermon here today, but I just felt like sharing this. It is life that we are here for. And so in the life of Paul, this, there was, he healed, he even raised someone from the dead. He did not stop its flow. He surrendered fully to it. He received visions, and he followed his heart, and, for example, walking straight into the lion's den that was Jerusalem, despite the rational arguments of everyone else. And he said something. He said something to the effect of, sorry, pollen's getting to me. He said something to the effect of, hey, why are you breaking my heart? He said, I'm ready to be bound, and if necessary, to die. And he said, that he talked about how this is, the life is more powerful than death. And, when he was being dragged off to prison, he asked the guards, he said, let me speak to the people. And they permitted it, and the crowd, the mob, basically, it was a mob scene, just like as it had been, with Jesus. And Paul was silent for a moment, and then the crowd settled down, and he spoke. And when he spoke in Aramaic, the language of Yeshua. He said in Aramaic, he spoke to them of life. He was being dragged off to prison and potentially his death, and he spoke of life. It was the thing that he spoke of, was life, because life is who Jesus was. It is why he came to be with us. It is the way that he opened up for us. And so the same life that could not be contained by death, it rushed out before Paul, again, when Jesus came a second time to him and told him that, he had been to Jerusalem and now he must go to Rome. And that life that could not be contained by death is what was with Paul when he, languished in prison. And, there was it seemed like a never ending cycle. There was never going to be a trial. And Paul he took, that life was his sustenance. It was his very breath. It was what compelled him to remain in this life, one with this life and one with all of life, and to speak life when others spoke death against him. That life moved in him and through him when he was mocked and called insane. It stirred up the tide of love that was born of a life that could not be stopped by such accusations. And he held fast because of that life to what was within his soul. And he did not allow himself to be swayed by the illusion of all the other things that were set before him, all the other lesser truths that seemed true by this reality here and now. But he did not succumb to that. And that was thanks to the life that could not be contained by death, and that life that Jesus came for. That was the truth, the life, the truth, the way. That was what Paul said. And that life was present when facing certain death and a mighty, mighty storm. Paul, a prisoner again on his way to Rome by boat, he worked for the good of those who held him captive. And he stepped into a leadership role as a servant leader to those who would condemn him and who mistreated him in some cases. And Paul worked for their good. And all were saved from that shipwreck off the coast of Malta. And then Paul shook off the snake that emerged from the fire. And he was able to do this because of his unity with life, his belonging to life, and that life moving through him. That's what allowed him to see the snake for what it was, to cast it off, and to not be harmed. And the life is what allowed others to see this and to recognize it as life. And that life was there when, still prisoner, he made his way back to Italy, and he wrote and taught under house arrest, and he remembered the things that were most true about this life, and he um, left a legacy, and left many letters to the church that was now scattered, or the believers who were scattered in what came to be called the churches. Um, so that life that stirred in Saul, a murderer, a persecutor, that that life that was awakened in him first directly by Jesus on the road to Damascus, and called him to arise from his slumber. That life that radically altered the course of his own life and the course of human history, that life is powerful, and it is accessible to us here now today. It is one life, and it is here, and it will move unhindered by human limitations or those who seek to stem its tide. It will shake the very foundations of all we know to be. And it is an invitation to life that is ours now. And finally, I want to talk about the life of Jesus, the Christ that flowed through the one who had walked with him on the way and whose story was seemingly lost to time. But this life that could not be contained by death, it strengthened her through the lonely days that did come, that were inevitable because she too was human. And it was that life that nourished her as she wrote by the light of a single candle many, many nights, and as she remembered the stories of life that could not be denied, were not extinguished by his death. And the life filled the woods that she walked in, the sound of 10,000 angels wrapping their wings around her, and the birds, the life that could not be contained by death. It ran through the cold streams in the south of France, and other places she was, where she bathed, and where she taught, and where she, um, even some say baptized, and those cold waters, the life was in them, and her life was an offering of love. And this life that could not be contained by death, it fed her when her heart was so broken she couldn't find the strength to eat. And the life that could not be contained by death sustained her when she felt that she had lost her mind and she had no words, and she could no longer process things. She lost that which was her greatest gift at one time, her ability to articulate the teachings of Yeshua, and it seemed that there was no more purpose. This is my understanding of her life I'm sharing, and this life of Jesus, this life of God that could not be contained by death. It is what met her on that mountain. It met her on several mountains. It met her on the mountain where there was a betrayal. It met her on the mountain where there was a revelation that was and is a promise. And it is the promise that we will partake in that life, and that our world will be again one with that life. So this life that could not be contained by death, it breathed her day by day. And when her body was worn out, that life called to her. And when she was violated and attacked or beaten or left for dead or hit over the head with some instrument meant to stop her, that life rose up within her. That life flows out from her legacy today. And that life will not be contained by death. And, you know, the way I see it anyway, it flows still, that life from her story. It's like a river full of stars, like going out in every direction. And that river full of stars, it's also a crown of remembrance that has been placed in the hearts of so many who are here and now. You, me. Do you remember the life, this life that moved in the one who stood by Yeshua, who he called his strong tower, and whose steadfast devotion, love for him, yes, but her devotion to the true teachings of Jesus, that can never truly be stolen or erased by time. That love is powerful, and it is available to you and to me. That love is life. And that life is the light of our time, here and now. And we are meant to shine it forth and to let that life flow through us. And that life will move unhindered by any human limitation or attempt to stem its tide. Because now is the time, and because that life will shake the very foundations of all we think we know. And yet, there is only life that will come from it. Any death that we see is merely an illusion. Now is the time for life. It's not just a story in time. It's not just one religious tradition. No, that's the opposite of Jesus didn't come to set up a religion at all. His life is a testament to that. Really, his teachings, even the ones recorded in the gospel narrative, are a teaching and a testament to that. That the life that he came to embody, the love of God, is for all. And not only for all, to as a gift for all, but we are meant to receive its gift through our coming together, to sit around tables, to break bread, to laugh, to experience a joy that we never even imagined was possible here, to cease all attachments, to limitation that is placed upon us by a human system or a particular a, a particular belief system that has been perpetuated through the ages. Life, life, life. It's why we're here. It's the gift of grace that is offered to you and to me right here and right now. I love you all, and I just, if there's anything that I would offer you, it is that you are one with that life right now, and that anything that you think is keeping you from that life, any conditions that you see in your reality, any way that you see yourself as compromised, as incomplete, as flawed, as filled with something that is not life, it is can be shed in an instant. In an instant, and all that is required is that you know yourself to be one with life, and that you open your hearts to receive and to see with the eyes of the heart, to hear with the ears of the heart, to allow yourself to receive fully the grace that is so freely given to you and to me. And those glimpses that we have of those who did receive that life in the early days, before those early days when the first followers of Yeshua, and also is exhibited in the life of Paul, in those early days, it was before, one by one, they, as we, caved in, and they allowed their energy to be siphoned off, and they, out of a variety of motivations, and human failings, they succumb to the temptation to latch on to various, again, human systems or um, power dynamics, and structures, often because they believed that perhaps it was a vehicle to, funneling the message. Even Jesus's closest followers succumb to this. We know the story of Peter, both immediately after the crucifixion, um, or I'm sorry, immediately before the crucifixion, but also after the resurrection of Jesus, and then, with allowing himself to be set up in Rome as within that power structure. And the whole story is not recorded in the narratives that we currently have. But there was a lot that happened, and I believe toward the end of his life. And I wish so much that we could find the records of this, that he fully understood. And he remembered those first days. He remembered that Pentecost day. And he saw clearly in a similar fashion. I believe that, the same was true of Paul, who had experienced so much of the mystery and grace of Yeshua and Jesus, and the life and the freedom for which we are set free. And even Mary Magdalene, and there were moments in her life and ministry where it seemed as if all would be lost unless there was a alignment with a certain ways to get the message out, to get the story out, which is what she was so passionate about, as I remember it anyway. And so, one by one, they sort of, fell into this, not completely all of them, but to in some way they compromised, that they took their eyes off the life, and not just their eyes but their hearts. They allowed just a momentary weakness to lead them astray, or they forgot the true vine that was Jesus, and the life of Jesus that was everything, and that whose reach knew no bounds. And again, that life that could not be contained by death. So some of us here and now, some of us have worked through particular blocks in our life, and we have returned to our soul's truth and radiance, what I refer to as our star power. We have returned to that life, that is the life of God, and we feel it, and we know that the Christ light um, is the hope for humanity, and that we are here to be co-heirs with Christ, to usher in a revolution of love that again is eternal in its nature. It's ever unfolding. There is no there. There is only now, and now is always your next opportunity window. And now is the time when we are offered this life. And when, as I spoke to in the last video, when we have touched the truth of our true identity, of our true life's desire, of our true service, when we have touched that, then we have begun to remember that all is not lost and never could be. And then we're no longer focused on what we have seen for 2,000 years as a failed experiment, and rather we are we are embodying and living the teaching of love, of life, of light. And we become the channel of blessing, and we refuse to compromise anymore the almighty power of that life, or to allow its flow to be stemmed or impeded by structures or containers that are way, way, way too small for now. Because right now we can choose to see that there is no separation between you and me. There is no separation. There is only the light of all of humanity, the liberation of humanity that is made possible when we open our hearts and partake of the one life. Jesus said, I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. The table has been set. This is our world. This is our time. and the life is right here, right now.